Will you be remembered after you're dead? The Z-List Dead List podcast about obscure people from history with me, Izzy Lawrence. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Z-List Dead List. It is a cold, blustery March now. It is March, yeah. Not February anymore, but spring is a long way. I'm actually watching the snow outside my office window as we speak, and it is, it's a rare thing when you get snow in the UK. It doesn't happen very often when it's proper. I quite like it. It makes me think of old Charles Dickens books and that sort of thing. Now, Charles Dickens, as we all know, born 1812? I think he became a journalist initially. He was a big one for looking after the poor and looking after sanitation. You can argue that Oliver Twist and Martin Chuzzlewit were all about the plight of the poor, because the poor used to die a lot and used to die of disease a lot. And why did they used to die of disease? Because they lived in cities. And cities, they should have really been called shitties, because there was a lot of poo about. One of my favourite people, Edwin Chadwick, who's a Mancunian, came down from Manchester, made it his business to sort out the prisons, slums and hospitals of the mid-Victorian era. He was the guy with the pump, so he noticed that everybody, I think, was dying of typhoid, or it could have been cholera. One of those nasty waterborne ones. And he worked out, looking at maps, because he was a geographer at heart. He plotted all the deaths and worked out that actually it was this water pump. And this was before really we'd understood about germ theory. So he was just like, I'll just take the handle off this water pump. And sure enough, all the deaths stopped. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to, if it isn't clear already, talk about poo. And there is one man who is an expert on this excremental business, and that is my good friend Paul Duncan McGarrity. He does the Ask an Archaeologist podcast. He tours around the UK quite a lot. We're both tall. We both wear the same glasses. We're both pretty much the same age, I think, and we both fight. So we both got pictures on Facebook showing our black eyes. I fight jiu-jitsu. He fights, medieval real battle combat. He basically hits people with swords for real. It is quite horrific. I caught up with him in Brighton. We were both there doing the Dead Talks show at the Brighton Science Festival. This is us backstage. You can actually hear the show going on in the background. I suppose it should really be the foreground. But you can hear the talking from the theatre. You are an archaeologist and comedian.
Yes. But
a weird archaeologist who doesn't dig.
At the moment.
Yeah. At the moment.
I still get called on to dig now and again.
And what are you talking about now? Who have you picked, or have you not?
I have picked someone.
Oh, okay. He did a face which just said, what?
Yes. No. I did pick someone. It's not the most obscure person.
That's all right. We can do...
But it's somebody who I think deserves as much recognition as the person who always gazumps in every list.
Right.
So, if you say Victorian engineer, who do you think of?
Brunel.
Yes. Everyone thinks of blinking Brunel. But I think they should be thinking at exactly the same time of Joseph Bazalgette.
The Bazalgette printer? No, hang on.
No.
That's what I think of. I think of a really crappy, inky, expensive
one that goes
with
all of its printing. No, Joseph Bazalgette, the man who saved London from the stench of the Thames.
Oh, see, I think Chadwick, but that's a different one.
Yeah, Joseph Bazalgette was the single greatest civil engineer in the history of moving poo.
Well, I heard that he was quite leery. That's a civil joke right there. Okay, so Bazalgette. Now, what was the problem with London poo?
The problem with London poo was that we had a really interesting system of drinking water, which was that we took it from the Thames, which is also where we put all of our poo. And weirdly, that caused problems.
Were those problems called cholera?
Yes, and typhoid and jippy tummies of a generic nature. We also had a really weird system of building sewers, which was that it was devolved to individual groups within each ward and council, and those people would be made up of 6 or 7 different guys that sat on a board, all deciding where their sewers should go, and their sewers tended to go to the border of their ward and then into the next ward where it just flowed into it without a care.
Cesspits at the borders.
It wasn't even cesspits, it was usually just like pipes and their problem. So what happened is, obviously, you've got the standpipe test, where people are able to identify typhoid coming from a single stand pipe, and so like
it's like a pump that it's still in that London street, isn't it?
It is,
and it is Chadwick who did that.
He took the handle off it, and weirdly, like everyone stopped getting typhoid, and he was like, "The typhoid was from here. Stop using this pipe."
Because it's about the same type as germ theory as we got.
Well, it was a changeover from miasma, and the idea that diseases were transported via the smell to germthema and things being little critters coming to get you, which is really interesting with Joseph Bazalgette, because he, for a very long time, was a main proponent of miasma theory.
Really?
Yes. So whilst he's the person who saved London, he sort of did it, like, he was onto the right plan, but for the wrong reason, until about halfway through, and he went, "Oh, go on then, germs."
If we're going to get funding.
Yeah. But no, he changed his mind, but it was halfway through the plan. He designed this incredible sewer system. And to solve the problem of smelly streets. It just happened that to solve the problem of smelly streets, he separated drinking water and sewage water. So it took ages to try and sort out the Thames. Basically, the Thames had been a major issue of pollution for centuries. It became a particular problem with the invention of the flushing loo. Because prior to that, everything had been held in cesspits, and whilst some cesspits had massively overflown, and there was sort of evidence that people would, like how if the house is so messy, you'll sometimes just go, I'll just make a route through the mess and live. Like,
that is basically how I live.
Is that how you live? Yeah, you have like...
It depends how many gigs I've had.
You have sheep paths, basically, through your own house. Well, imagine that in the basement, where it's too much poo inside the cesspit, and people have just put bricks down and sort of stepped over to get to to where they're going to deposit further waste.
Oh, well done then. That sounds horrific.
So that's the kind of thing that he was dealing with, but obviously there's a huge amount of money has to go into this system. They have to take all of the various groups, turn them into one body, get them to talk to each other, make an overarching plan for the sewage for the whole of London.
Step one bit back. So the flushing toilets made the Thames worse
because instead of going into people pooping into cesspits and then those cesspits being cleaned out by dunny men or night soil men.
Night soil men.
Yes, or gong farmers.
Gong farmers.
I think that's a 16th, 15th century term for it.
It's like, what I like about the dunny men, though, is that dunny is still what Australians call poo. Houses, shit houses. Shit houses is fine, I think. Well, that's interesting that they were called dunnymen. But yeah, and the night soil men sounds really quite nice.
Like they're stealing it, though.
Yeah, at night. But you want to do it at night. One, because I presume the smell would be less as well, because you don't have the sun heating it up.
Well, yeah, but they'd be like, can you imagine being out on the streets of London at night, and there's just all these carts trundling through the darkness.
Full of poo.
Full of poo. But the poo served a good purpose, because it was taken out of the city, taken to the farms around London, and used to fertilise the soil of the farms that then fed London. It's a good system.
It's a good system. No, they do. I think there's certain hotels that you used to be able to stay in Japan, which you would be able to, pay for them with your poo.
Wow, an interesting barter system. I have nothing to give but the lunch you fed me.
I think basically that you'd have to pay for the meal. I don't know if you had much choice, and yes, it's fish bones and.
Yeah. Oh goodness me. Get me a coffee. I'm not paying for this.
Don't be. Being constipated in Japan would be very expensive. Anyway.
I'm going to need an emoji and somewhere to stay.
So the cesspit system wasn't working because basically...
So with the flushing loo, the invention of the flushing loo, these private houses started washing that away. And whilst it was more sanitary in their abodes, it had to go somewhere. And where it went was the Thames. And it was still the source of the drinking water for London.
And also, I remember hearing once that they got, like, the Houses of Parliament, which were quite new then, they were newly built, had to hang, like, bleach.
And that's how the money came. Because there was a day where Parliament has to be suspended because the stench from the Thames is so strong that no one can stand it, even with the bleach in the way. And that's when they finally decide to act, because it turns out when you drive them from their place of work and make it uncomfortable, the politicians will do something. All it took was about 100,000 gallons of poo.
For 100,000 gallons of poo, politicians could be made to...
to do anything. This is not a policy decision.
Well, I'm seeing potential.
Just holding them over a cesspit.
Exactly. There you go, do something. Cool. So why did they pick Bazalgette to do something about it?
Bazalgette had been sort of like working behind the scenes on various different plans. This was, as I say, this was the third or fourth go around of trying to build something together. So he'd come on as like a junior engineer, had done a lot of the drawings and a lot of the assisting on some of the smaller plans and some of the other ones. And eventually he got to a position where they were like, all right, you've done a lot of sewers. You're going to get to build the big one. And it was huge. Joseph Bazalgette is responsible for the building of the Victoria Embankment, the Albert Embankment, Blackfriars Embankment, and Putney Bridge. He designed 3 of the bridges over the Thames, and the reason he built embankments was for a number of reasons. 1, the embankment includes all of the sewers which catch the drains coming towards the Thames and then transport the poo further downriver. 2, he narrowed the Thames to increase the speed of it, so that when the poo goes into the Thames further away from London, it actually gets pushed further out to sea.
He accelerates the poo.
Yes, he basically turned it into a piece of plumbing in its own right. He turned the whole river, because prior to that, it was so tidal. The reason that the poo was staying in London is it was going, I'm nearly at the sea, I haven't got the power. I'm nearly at the sea, oh no, I've got the power. And what was happening is every time the tide came back in,
all the poo came back in,
more poo came from the people in the houses, and the poo went, let's try and leave London. No, we can't leave London, right? So he narrowed it, increased the speed, and now the poo is just shooting out towards France, which for the Empire was a win-win situation.
But what about the ducks? Because I mean, London's. How didn't that affect like the ports and everything else? Because wasn't London like the main port?
Mm-hmm. They were still able to, because he narrowed it at only one particular area. It made the speed of it come a little bit faster, and boats would have struggled a little bit more, but they were still able to get up the Thames. It actually increased the depth of the Thames, because obviously he then stopped the riversides from coming up. He had these strict walls, so now the Thames actually rises slightly high. So at high tide, you can even get deeper draft boats in.
Nice. So he probably increases the life.
Probably does, yeah. So he does all of that. So the embankment in Victoria also includes, as well as the sewers, it includes a small railway line for the post office, I think, but it definitely includes the not the Metropolitan line. Oh, which railway line is that?
No, District Line.
District Line. Yeah. So it includes he built out on it so that they could have a railway line, a small tunnel for the post office, the sewers, everything is in there, and he built them all in one go.
Wow.
He's also the first person to use bricks and Portland cement for a major works, and he did that he ran experiments to see whether it would hold up. It has held up better than he expected, because the bricks are porous, and over using the sewers they have now become stronger because the bricks are now infused with decades of poo. So his initial building work is now way stronger than he thought it was going to be.
Wow.
Yeah. He designed
I
three.
love the fact that poo's reinforcing.
Yeah,
That's...
it's a structural element now. Crusty poo.
Oh my god. Excellent.
They also put a road on top of it because the Strand was apparently totally trafficked up. So the embankment became a way of opening up traffic within London. Essentially, he made central London work again. He designed his sewers for a population of about, I think he was thinking 2.5 million to 3 million. At the time, there was 1 million people. His sewer system, up until last year, was still servicing 8 to 9 million people.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I presume it's not like we produce less poo.
No.
We probably produce more.
Smaller and delicate packages.
Well, if body weights are going up, therefore the amount of food we're eating, therefore the amount of food that comes out must. And there's a lot more food waste as well.
So there was
dead goldfish.
There was a major disaster
Oh.
based on his designs, which is worth taking into account.
Okay.
Because what happened is obviously he moved all of the poo further downriver. And this disaster eventually led to water treatment plants being added to the system, big pump houses like Greenwich, which is a lovely one. It looks like an Italian mansion house.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful design, magnificent. If you open the door and it was, 100 years ago, you'd see, oh, who lives here? Open the door and there'd just be two big steam-powered poo machines pumping poo 3 kilometres out of London. It'd just be like, whoa. And I don't know what's at the other end of that pipe. I assume there's a farmer going, well, turn it off.
Or a Frenchman.
Yeah, but he always put loads of design elements into it, these incredible designs. But when it initially opened the system, it did put the effluents back into the Thames, further away from where we were taking water, and therefore better for us, but back into the Thames and pushing out to sea, untreated. Summer, paddle steamer, pleasure boat. About 300 people on board.
The thing about paddle steamers, they haven't got much of a hull. They're very flat-bottomed.
They're very flat-bottomed.
And they're very high and tall.
Also, they don't hold up very well when coal-carrying steamers from Newcastle take a corner of the river too sharply and cleft them in twain. Cut the paddle steamer in half at the exact point that the poo pipe of the entirety of London empties into the Thames. It was the highest loss of life in a single Thames disaster. Nearly everyone on board died, many of them still standing up in the boat when it was recovered, because the gas had killed them.
Whoa.
Almost instantly from going into the water. A few people had managed to swim to land, but they were super sick. So obviously they introduced treatment.
The methane just
killed people.
Wow, they just couldn't get oxygen, so they just gassed a lot. That's not a good way to go.
No, what? Drowning in poo? You surprised me.
Well, no, not even drowning, being gassed by the smell
of poo
before you drown. I suppose, I don't know if is that more preferable.
Do you know what? I do hope it never happens.
Oh,
and it won't, because they put the water treatment plants in, and now, it's all clean water that comes out. But it was a minor wrinkle in what was close to the most perfect design. Bazalgette then went on in his career to advise on 150 sewer systems around the world.
Because it basically, what sewer systems do is they just allow us to have big cities.
They allow us that. It's such a boring element of civil design, potentially, but it just turns out to be the most important thing if you want to have a conurbation of that size.
Am I right? I can't remember if there's a thing called pigs, and if that's gas piping or if it's sewerage. They're big balls.
Oh, that they shoot down.
Yeah,
I nearly got hit by one once.
They're called pigs.
Yeah, no, someone fired one on a site we were on, and they hadn't secured the end, and as it rattled, it turned, and honest to God, this thing just went boink, boink, boink in front of me like a cannonball. I was like, should I report Joe, I'm just going to go and really enjoy my lunch.
So you're basically, your research is on like buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I'm a standing building specialist.
So
and at the moment I'm working as a community engagement officer.
Are you?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know what that means.
It just means I try and tell people about archaeology that we're doing.
Well, you're doing your job now. Look at you. About poo. But why is it you think that Bazalgette? Because the name's so familiar. But like I said, I think people think printers.
Well, that's just it. It's because he had such a massive influence on effluence.
You're so happy with that.
It literally came to me mid-sentence.
You're so happy. An influence and effluence, yeah.
But genuinely, so whenever people think of Victorian engineers, they think of the Stevensons, they think of Brunel. They think of steam engines and bridges, and they think of the infrastructure like that. But what they don't think of, because it's not sexy, is the infrastructure that kept London going for 150 more years. And only now, at 3 times the capacity he designed it for, are we having to make changes to Bazalgette's designs.
Wow. It's pretty good, isn't it?
It's very impressive. For a man who made all of his money from poo, it turns out there's a lot of brass in muck. I'm going to go up to the Edinburgh Fringe this year with a show called A Practical Guide to Attacking Castles.
Obviously.
In which I will be performing every day in a full suit of armour, which is a full working suit of armour, in which I will have had actual competitive matches with Russians.
His black eye is somewhat reduced from the photo.
Yeah, the black eye is reduced, but the scar through my eyebrow from where someone hit me with the sword is still there.
It is.
It went all the way through the muscle. Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
I don't know if you can see my wrist at the moment.
You've got a lovely bruise on the wrist.
That is from a man's finger.
Oh!
I was stabbing him in the head. This is jiu-jitsu, it's not bad. And his finger just was like that. He's got a sore finger too, and it just connected. That was a week ago, and it's just... It swelled up so huge immediately. Everybody thought it was broken, but I don't think it is.
Do you know what I really enjoy about our stories when we talk about this? Is that you go, I was stabbing in the head, it was jiu-jitsu, and my story goes, so I was stabbing him in the head, and it ends.
Yeah, but, yeah.
So, yes, that's going to be in Edinburgh during August. You can also follow me at Paul Duncan McGee or at Ask an Arch. ARCH, not Ask an Arch, as a lot of people think it is.
It's Ask an Arch, it says. You should just call it Ask an Arch, because that's how it's spelled.
Yeah. Well, that's my podcast, which is Ask an Archaeologist. We do interviews with people in the heritage industry, and I also answer questions posed by the audience, of which have ranged from, really specific, interesting ones about how do you define gender in the archaeological record, up to what's your favourite sandwich?
Nice. So, is it peanut butter?
No, it's the one thing that I've got the most grief from people after.
Really?
Yeah. Because it turns out I have deviant taste, which I didn't know. It's tuna and cottage cheese.
That sounds... See, I'm one of these people who go, that sounds really nice, but I can see why people disagree.
Genuinely. The things that I've said on there, and that's the one where everyone's like, that's wrong. Unsubscribe!
So poo. Who knew poo could be so important? And while I do like Bazalgette, still I prefer Edwin Chadwick, for he was pretty much the main drive behind the Public Health Act of 1848. And people who know the Public Health Act of 1848 are just like, yeah, that's a good Public Health Act. He also, Edwin Chadwick, right, he championed Florence Nightingale. He encouraged her, he had a correspondence with her, and encouraged her to write papers, which he then slipped under the noses of all the important dudes. So arguably, without Chadwick, Florence Nightingale might have been forgotten in history. So thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Right, talking of poo, I have got a bit of an advert for you. And this is an advert not for another podcast, it is an advert for my services, ladies and gentlemen, because I am currently running some workshops, and I'm doing these in UCL at the moment, and I'm doing them, on occasion in other institutions like the Wellcome Trust and St Mary's University. But what I'm doing is I am training people in public speaking. That is not just being funny, guys. That is getting the words out your face when a room full of strangers is staring at you. A lot of people struggle with this, and since I had that article in The Guardian, I got a few emails going, can you help me? So my plan is to run a few workshops in the summer in order to see if you're a fit for this, or if you want to come along maybe to these workshops and improve your sales and your confidence and your jobs and all. No, just basically get comfortable being you whilst people are staring at you. Do go to izzy.com and sign up for my mailing lists, where you can download a free copy of a cheat sheet, a few little tips to help calm your nerves when you're on stage. So if you want to do that, please go to izzy.com, that is ISZI.com, sign up for my newsletter, and hopefully I'll be running a few workshops in the summer. So please, if you're interested, get on board with that. Other than that, I will see you in a few weeks. I hope you enjoy this episode. Once again, please do leave me a review on iTunes, send me feedback. Thank you to those who sent feedback. You are amazing and I love you, and some of it has been critical, and I have hopefully taken on board what you said. So hopefully. Otherwise, you can get in touch at throwsticks@izzy.com or deadlist@hotmail.co.uk. You've been listening to the Z-List Deadlist podcast with me, Izzy Lawrence. To find out more, please visit izzy.com. To support the show, share this episode with your friends, family, cats, anybody with ears, basically. Keep spreading the words, and I hope you liked this history. Now, don't forget to flush. See you soon.